Kim Knight is the author of Widows Might, Embracing Life After the Loss of Your Spouse. And she suddenly and unexpectedly lost her husband when he was just 56 years old. And one day went from planning the future with her best friend to planning a funeral. Good to have you with us today, Kim.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
For friends that might have missed your last interview with us, if you could just kind of take us back to that moment when life changed in an instant.
My husband was 56 years old. He was downsized out of his job about 3 months prior to his death, and we had just bought a franchise, and he went to the bank.
So really, it was a kind of a little bit of a brand new time of life for you.
Oh, brand new. It was really exciting. In fact, he was excited that he went to the bank to open a corporate checking account. And while he was there, suffered an aneurysm in his aorta. And the gentleman that he was with at the bank, the banker called me, he goes, "Mrs. Knight," he was so excited because I had worked for him for 20 years, and now we were getting ready to buy a business, and he was going to work for me now.
And to think that, I mean, that quickly everything changed. What's that moment like? And for people that are maybe just experiencing it right now, some of the turmoil that moment contains.
You know, I will say that it's way more devastating than I expected that it might be. I don't know if you ever think about things like that, but honestly, the way everything happened in my life changed. My job went away, my husband went away, and truthfully, I thought differently about me.
Oh, I just wanted to know, like, when you just said that you thought differently about yourself, did you find yourself redefining who you were or wanted to be, or
Absolutely.
did you try to keep everything the same?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of wanting things to feel normal.
Okay.
But I made changes. I moved from one place to another. I started going to a different church. But you do have to redefine who you are. One of my big awakenings was realizing I'm no longer half of a couple. And that's really different thinking after having been married for such a long time.
You get very practical in Widows Might as well. You talk about having to find, where's the password? So having gone through this kind of an event, what kind of advice would you give someone, you know, just not in preparation, but just so that it makes, when those times of transitions, if they come, it makes it a little bit easier on the spouse who's remained?
That is absolutely vital to do that. If you don't know your spouse's password, your children's password, your parents' password, it's really important to have that discussion, have a cup of coffee, sit down, let's talk about this, because really there are a lot of things that happen electronically now, banking and bill pay, all of those things. And if you're not doing that, I have never been in my husband's personal email because I couldn't figure out what his password was. And honestly, he didn't know my password either. You think, why would he need to know my password? He shouldn't be in my email. And if you don't want somebody to know, make a list, write it on an envelope, put it in a file someplace, because you do need to know, where are your wills? What do they say? Review them once a year or so that you know what you have. If you have life insurance, where is it? Things happen really fast. If you have a funeral, there are a lot of expenses. And you need to know, like, how am I going to deal with this when it comes up?
How did your husband's death affect your relationship with your children?
Well, I was married once before. My children were from my first marriage, but he was their stepdad from the time they were around 5 years old. And they were extremely helpful. I'm so grateful. They were kind of advisors on the book and kind of kept me on the right path and served as readers and advisors on that. But my kids have been absolutely stellar the whole time.
And what about your relationship with the Lord and the faith that really, gets kind of shaken to the core when these unexpected things happen?
It does get shaken. I'm not going to say that there was no, like, wow, I should have gotten a break here a little bit because I'm, a devout Christian. But that's really kind of not biblical. There are lots of people in the Bible that did kind of bad things and suffered the consequences for them. There were a lot of great people that still had struggles with the Lord. I've just been kind of grateful that I felt like the Lord was there. There are a few days that I've had questions about that, but I've stayed really involved at a new church, and I'm just keeping on trying to learn as much as I can about how it's going.
Last time you were with us, you shared about the strength of the support network that really helped through the time. Getting down to just, again, some practicalities, when someone that we know loses a spouse or loses a loved one suddenly, unexpectedly, what's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do as a friend, as a fellow congregant or church member?
I think that there aren't really that many rules. People don't know what to say. I will say that. I still don't know what to say. But the conversation always starts out like the topic is widow's mite, and people will go, oh, I hate that word, and I'm sorry your husband died, and I'm sorry too, and you get to a point where there's not really anywhere to go from there. But I will say, when you don't know what to say, just say, I'm here for you. One thing people do is they let me know what I can do for you. And I will say, I'm not the person that would ever call you up and say, please help me.
Right.
So check in, not just say, let me know if you need food. Call up, I'm bringing food. Let's go to have coffee. Do you want to sit with me at church? That was a really hard thing, going back to church and sitting by myself when I'd been with my husband all that time. The first time I went to my new church, I actually cried because it just felt so different. But I just say to walk beside people, to be there for them, say it's going to be okay, and I'm here for you.
Kim, would you say that it's dangerous or okay to set a time frame in which you're going to get back into life or try to move forward? Because I know that you say that you shouldn't make any major decisions within, maybe a year's time, but is that time different for everyone when they get back into it?
Absolutely. I'm going to go with dangerous to set a time frame. And I will tell you that men and women have different time frames. Statistically, men are way more likely to be in a relationship or married within 2 years of losing a spouse.
Wow.
And I know that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the different skill sets that women provide that men haven't been doing. They haven't been going to the grocery store. They haven't been cooking meals. And they haven't been planning the social calendar. So I think a lot of times men get back in it faster. I also think it makes a big difference if your spouse was ill for a time rather than a sudden thing. People have told me that they started their grief process upon diagnosis. And it might be 2 years or 5 years or 20 years, but their grieving happens all along the way. So it might be different for them. I think we judge people who get back into the game faster, but I don't think we should.
You mentioned again last time we were together that in speaking now and addressing the issue of being a widow or widower, you've met people that some have kind of gone through a process and got back in life, so to speak, in a year, 2 years, some 20 to 30 years. For someone stuck in that place of grief, of sorrow, of pain, of loss, how would you encourage them to kind of take the next step?
If you are stuck, you have to make some changes. And it doesn't really matter what you change. Maybe you go to a different exercise class. Maybe you learn to paint and you never learned to paint. Maybe you take up bridge. That's one of the things I took up to meet new people. You cannot sit at home and expect that it's going to change without doing something on your own. You can't expect your friends to fix it, or your kids, or your parents. And so I'm really big on the personal responsibility issue there. Take charge of what you can. If you need to get a job, go get a job. If you want to realign your finances, do that. If nothing else, go volunteer. And I think once you get out in the world, you see that you're not the only one that's dealing with struggles. There are people out there. We just had a promotion on the Haiti problem. There are people that are struggling, and they could use your help. And sometimes it's good to get out of yourself a little bit and help other people.
And we've got about a minute left, Kim. You do also talk about kind of new relationships again. So what was that like, if I may ask, when you turned that page in your journey?
I was introduced to a gentleman by a friend of mine about 2 years after my husband died. And honestly, I wasn't even thinking about dating. It's one of those things that I kind of felt married for a long time. So it's really been an interesting journey trying to embrace what life has to offer on the dating front, trying to figure out what your elevator speech is, because again, you get about an hour to make your point, and it's like trying to start over when you've had a really intense, great marriage and you're having all this superficial conversation. I have to say, it's not my favorite thing, but I love men and I'd like to be in a relationship someday. So if you guys are out there.
There you go. Well, to connect with Kim,
I do have a Facebook page, but it's just been kind of a strange journey. Again, there might be a book there.
Oh,
Right, there you go.
boy, you're
Well,
about to get a lot of applicants.
Just kidding.
Thank you so much again for joining us today. Kim Knight, our guest. Widow's Might, Embracing Life After the Loss of Your Spouse. To pick up a copy of his book and to hear more of Kim's story, you can go to harvest-tv.com. And guys, there is a link to her Facebook page there that you'll find. Thanks for joining us again, Kim. We've got a lot more coming up in just a moment.